Well, John and I did a double act of the current and the future with regard to the assessment. One of the, as you appreciate, we're sticking to the conventional assessments that are within the core surgical curriculum, because that's the curriculum we're working to. But it's the way in which we want to advocate enhancing the relationship between trainer and trainee. And in all three groups, it was prompted in the first one, and we took it on as a theme in the other two, was how do we use the weekly meeting, which south of Hadrian's Wall is 0.25, but the affluent people north have got 0.5 of a PA to do it in. And it's very much it's one or two of the options that are open to us. And the general conclusion was a generalized, holistic approach to establish a good working relationship between the educational supervisor and the trainee, so that on the basis we're looking at 12-month attachments, there will be the opportunity to have a good working relationship, to feedback and to reflect. We did discuss about options of possibly doing some CBD type work, but there were mixed views. Some felt that was a good idea and take a leaf out of the psychiatry and general practice regular sessions of feedback and discussion. Others felt perhaps it should be broader than that, so that you can address those issues where the trainee has some anxieties and not making the progress they want. Taking a leaf from this is from Richard Resnick's philosophy, it should be trainees to set the agenda, because they're the ones on the receiving end of training. So it's a good working relationship, but it was underpinned by the interaction between the clinical supervisor and the educational supervisor. That then brought up or led into this issue, which I think is another one a little bit like David's flagged up with the extended team. There are still some examples where there's a little bit of lacking complete support at executive level to provide this time in a job plan for a trainer. Some have got it, some haven't, some are pushing hard against doors which are beginning to open. Some have got it on a regular basis, and as was pointed out, a lot of people have annualised contracts, and so the same session each week is not necessarily regularly available. So it builds in an element of flexibility. But we know that's still a potential problem, and that's something I think we've got to think about as to how we can try and push that to make sure executives pick it up. The issue of the fact that it's a notional time available to do these feedbacks is difficult, because you can see how that might slip. The developments coming forward, and it's a little bit like the discussion we had this morning, and it seems to be a theme throughout the day, is to how we can ensure not necessarily the educational supervisors, because I think we can get them up to speed through the boot camp philosophy. Sorry, Stella, educational induction. Let's go to Aspire, it'll be easier. But to go through that philosophy that they can be brought up to speed, but we've got the main core component of the CSs for them to understand what's expected of them. And that remains a challenge as to how we best do that to get that faculty training done. There's an element of it evolving, and we've got, as I said this morning, there's some opportunities that we're looking at to try and do through the intercollegiate structures. And the thing that's not on there that has come out in discussion on that we should have perhaps added is the way in which the presentation of the feedback on the assessment of the CIPs is to get away from the potential risk of having a field of red blobs across an individual at an early stage in training, whereas the red blob means you're not making the progress against what is a high-level outcome at the end of training. So in other words, there should be a level expected at a certain stage of training which a trainee should achieve. Due credit should be given to that. That will allow us also to move people forward more quickly, because they should, if they've acquired those competencies quicker than is expected, that's a big plus. Without thinking, actually, you've not achieved the competence expected at the end of training of a CIP, because that will give you a red blob, as it were, because you haven't got complete competence in that area. So we're going to take that away. John's going to take that away with Maria to discuss how it's best presented on our ISCP. so that an individual will be expected to achieve a certain level equivalent to that level of training. And then once that's been approved, they can then move on. And if they do it quicker, they can move on quicker.
Thank you, Bill.